Nineveh. A city that never sleeps because fear never rests. Its walls rise like mountains of stone. Towers loom above the plains, carved with lions, bulls, and gods of war. Smoke coils endlessly into the sky as if the city itself exhales violence. On the streets below, iron boots strike stone. Chains rattle. Prisoners are dragged through dust and blood. The city believes itself untouchable, but its wickedness has risen, higher than its towers, higher than its gods. In Nineveh, her cruelty is normal. Power is worshipped, and fear is law. At the same time, God spoke to Jonah, the son of Amittai, a prophet chosen to hear God's voice carefully and to carry his message to others. Far from Nineveh, far from its screams and arrogance, lies another land, Israel. The wind moves gently through olive trees. The earth breathes peace. Here lives Jonah, son of Amittai, a prophet, a man who knows the voice of God. The Lord commanded Jonah to arise and go to Nineveh, that very great city, and to cry out against it, because God had seen that their evil behavior could no longer be ignored. Jonah understood the command completely and knew exactly what the Lord was asking him to do. Yet fear and resistance filled his heart when he thought about the danger, power, and distance of Nineveh. Instead of obeying the voice of the Lord, Jonah chose to rise and flee toward Tarshish, deciding to run away from the presence of the Lord rather than carry out God's command. Jonah went down to the seaport city of Joppa, a place where ships were constantly arriving and leaving to travel across the sea to distant lands. In Joppa, Jonah found a ship going to Tarshish and paid the fare so that he might sail with the crew and place as much distance as possible between himself and the Lord. As the ship sailed away from the land and the shoreline faded from view, Jonah believed that by leaving his homeland, he could also leave behind God's command. But the Lord sent out a great wind upon the sea, and the calm waters quickly turned into a mighty storm that threatened the journey. The storm grew so strong that the ship was in danger of breaking apart, and every wave struck the vessel with violent force. The sailors became afraid and cried out desperately, each man calling upon his own God in hope that someone would save them from the raging sea. In their fear, the sailors threw the ship's cargo into the sea, hoping that by lightening the load, they could keep the ship afloat and survive the storm. While the storm continued above the deck, Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship, where he lay down and fell into a deep and heavy sleep. The captain of the ship came to Jonah and woke him, urging him to call upon his God, so that God might think upon them and prevent them from perishing. The sailors then said to one another that they should cast lots, believing that this would reveal who was responsible for the terrible storm that had come upon them. The sailors questioned Jonah carefully and urgently, asking him who he was, what he had done, where he came from, and what people he belonged to. Jonah told them that he was a Hebrew and that he feared the Lord, the God of heaven, who created both the sea and the dry land. When the sailors understood that Jonah was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, they were filled with great fear and amazement. They asked Jonah what should be done to him so that the sea might become calm, because the storm continued to grow worse. Jonah told them to take him up and throw him into the sea, explaining that the storm had come upon them because of him. After praying, the sailors took Jonah and cast him into the sea, and the waters closed over him immediately. As soon as Jonah was thrown into the sea, the raging storm stopped, and the waters became completely calm. Jonah sank down into the deep waters of the sea, surrounded by darkness and the heavy weight of the ocean. The Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow Jonah, preserving his life according to his purpose. Jonah remained in the belly of the great fish for 3 days and 3 nights, exactly as the Lord had appointed. From inside the belly of the great fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God, calling out from a place of deep trouble where no human help could reach him. Jonah cried to the Lord because of his distress, and he remembered that even from the deepest place, the Lord was able to hear his voice. Jonah remembered how he had been cast into the deep, into the very heart of the seas, where floods surrounded him and strong waters closed over him. He felt as though all God's waves and billows were passing over him. Jonah thought that he had been driven away from God's sight. Yet he still held on to hope that he would look again toward God's holy temple. He promised that he would sacrifice to the Lord with a thankful voice, and would keep the promises he had made to God. He felt as though he had gone down to the roots of the mountains, where the earth seemed to close around him forever. Even in the darkness, Jonah's thoughts turned toward the place where God was worshipped, trusting that the Lord could hear prayer from anywhere. After Jonah prayed, the Lord spoke to the great fish, giving it a command that could not be resisted. The great fish moved swiftly toward the land, carrying Jonah according to the Lord's instruction. At the time chosen by God, the fish released Jonah onto dry land, ending his time in the depths. Jonah's prayer was finished. But God's work with him was not complete, for obedience was still required. After Jonah was delivered from the depths, the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, showing that God had not changed his command. The Lord again told Jonah to arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and to preach the message that God would give him. Jonah entered the city and began walking through it on the first day, carrying the message God had placed in his heart. Jonah entered the city and began walking through it on the first day, carrying the message God had placed in his heart. Jonah walked through the city. He cried out loudly to the people, delivering the warning God had commanded him to speak. The people of Nineveh believed God, and fear entered their hearts as they accepted the warning they had heard. They announced a fast, choosing not to eat food as a sign that they were sorry for their sins and wanted to change. From the greatest leaders to the smallest children, the people put on sackcloth to show their sorrow and repentance before God. The message of Jonah's warning traveled quickly through the city and reached the king of Nineveh. When the king heard what Jonah had proclaimed, he rose from his throne, showing that even the ruler took the warning seriously. The king laid aside his royal clothing, covered himself with sackcloth. The king made a decree and sent it throughout Nineveh by his authority and the authority of his nobles. The decree commanded that no person or animal should eat or drink anything, calling everyone to take the warning seriously. The king commanded the people to turn from their evil ways and to stop the violence that was in their hands. God saw their works and noticed that they turned from their evil ways with sincere hearts. Because of this, God chose not to bring upon Nineveh the destruction he had spoken of, and he showed mercy instead. When God did not destroy Nineveh, this greatly displeased Jonah, and deep anger rose within his heart because the city was spared. Jonah prayed to the Lord, pouring out his frustration and revealing what he had felt from the very beginning. Jonah explained that this was why he fled toward Tarshish, because he knew that God is gracious, merciful, slow to anger, and full of loving kindness. Jonah knew that God was ready to turn away from judgment when people repented, and this truth troubled him deeply. Because of his distress, Jonah asked the Lord to take his life, believing it was better for him to die than to live and see Nineveh forgiven. The Lord answered Jonah by asking whether it was right for him to be angry, calling Jonah to examine his own heart. Jonah left the city and sat down on its east side, choosing a place where he could watch to see what would happen to Nineveh. He made a small shelter for himself and sat under it in the shade while he waited, hoping to see what God would do to the city. The Lord prepared a plant and caused it to grow quickly over Jonah, giving him shade and relief from the heat. Jonah was exceedingly glad because of the plant, finding comfort and joy in the shade it provided. When the morning came, God prepared a worm that struck the plant, and the plant began to wither. As the sun rose higher, the plant dried up completely, and Jonah lost the shade that had protected him. God also sent a strong east wind, and the sun beat down on Jonah's head until he grew faint from the heat. God asked why he should not spare Nineveh, ending the story by revealing his mercy and leaving Jonah and all who hear the story to reflect on his compassion.